Hello and welcome. We start with Sudan. The war-torn country hosted its first guest for a high-level visit since the beginning of the civil war. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed met Sudan's de facto leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan in the Red Sea coastal town of Port Sudan. This town is currently the base of Sudan's army-aligned government, which has been fighting the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, for over a year. The crucial visit by Ethiopian Prime Minister comes with an aim to mediate in the conflict and to push for stability in the region. Many believe that he has a better chance to do so because he is also seen to be closer to the RSF. Last year, RSF leader General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo had visited Ethiopia on his first public wartime tour. Ethiopia is also a key ally of the United Arab Emirates, which has been accused of providing weapons to the RSF. However, Ethiopia's relations with the army have not been very cordial in recent years. Both sides have historically shared territorial disputes. One of the major disputes is over the region called Al-Fashaga. Now, in 2021, the Sudanese forces announced full control over the region. But Sudanese people have complained that Ethiopian bandits and militias have been operating in Al-Shafaga. And however, Abiy Ahmed clarified that he does not aim to take advantage of the Sudanese civil war to tackle its issues with Ethiopia. He has called his visit an effort to find sustainable solutions for stability for its neighbor, which also affects Ethiopia. Tens of thousands of Sudanese refugees have fled to the neighboring country amidst the raging conflict. Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, is also the headquarters of the African Union, and the bloc seeks to restart truce talks between the rival sides. Multiple efforts to break a truce between Sudan's warring parties have failed so far. Just 2 days ago, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi hosted talks on ending the Sudan war. Now Ethiopia and Egypt are also regional rivals. Sudanese civilian and political leaders met in Cairo on Saturday. However, neither the armed forces nor the RSF attended the meetings. Mediation efforts by Saudi Arabia and the United States have also failed so far. Meanwhile, the conflict has killed tens of thousands of people, with some estimates placing the death toll as high as 150,000, while around 10 million have been displaced. And Sudan's already fragile infrastructure and healthcare system has been decimated. Experts have warned that the country is being pushed to the brink of famine. The conflict certainly threatens regional instability, so it is to be seen if the Ethiopian Prime Minister could position himself as a mediator in the war and navigate a dialogue. Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Musa Mdunge. He is a political analyst joining us live from Dundee in the UK. Thank you for being with us.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, the Ethiopian Premier Abiy Ahmed is meeting Sudan's army chief, al-Burhan. This in an attempt to achieve peace and security in the region. What is the significance of this meeting, and what exactly are Ahmed's proposals?
Well, this is a very significant meeting that is being held in Sudan. I think the visit by the Ethiopian, premier in that country is a very critical one, as he perhaps held the best chance, as you've put it, in asserting some form or a roadmap towards some form of peace and stability within that region, or at least a ceasefire. And we know that Ethiopia has quite a vested interest in that particular region, given some of its own territorial claims, but as well as the kind of power it seeks to assert itself as in that particular region. You know, it's interesting if you think about it, that this particular conflict holds, in terms of involvement in dealing with this, four crucial members of the BRICS formation currently who entered, being Ethiopia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. And given that all these countries are operating within that region, I believe that it is in their interest, perhaps, that peace must be reestablished given the issues of refugee outflows of about
Yes.
2.5 million across that particular region. But of course, it's a very important economics region as well, given in terms of, you think of gas finds, renewables, you think of, the water security in that particular region that flows all the way from Uganda all the way to Egypt is very key. And so fixing and dealing with this conflict will be very central for the premier, who's facing his own, mind you, internal challenges back home. And so doing this kind of work in a country such as Sudan only helps him better shift his own political position back home, which has been facing some questions as well.
Absolutely. And Musa, let's just expand on it a little bit. This conflict has been raging for about 15 months. And as you've mentioned, it threatens to destabilize the entire region. Take us through your thoughts on this.
Well, certainly. I mean, if you think of the region where this conflict is happening, it's happening, this civil war is happening at a time where already you have just south of Sudan, and South Sudan has its own, internal political challenges there. You already have in Libya, for example, a country that has faced years of civil conflict, which is also receiving an outflow of refugees from Sudan. So, the impact of this country's conflict currently is that it's happening in a cloud of regional conflicts that are happening. And so the intervention by Ethiopia and the further intervention by countries such as South Africa as well, which has played a pivotal role, particularly in South Sudan, is all aimed with ensuring that the region can certainly take control of finding solutions to these challenges. If you recall, Alison, back in the 2000s, there was this growing cry for African solutions to African problems that was spearheaded by then President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. And so certainly when you see leaders from the continent trying to come to grip with such conflicts, it's because of the economic damage that these conflicts are having in terms of investor sentiment in the region. Often the challenge with African economies is when investors have often looked at African countries, they've not looked at them as individual states, but have often taken them as a unit. And so conflicts that are happening across the continent have a way of impacting investor sentiment in the region. And in a time, you would imagine, Alison, where we are trying to pursue an Africa Free Trade Agreement, bringing the continent closer together, conflicts such as the one happening in Sudan are a stumbling block towards that greater economic integration and economic development that we need to see.
Absolutely. The ripple effects are far-reaching. Now, both sides have been accused of committing war crimes by the UN, so this makes it tricky. What is the way forward, especially considering the high fatality rates that we are seeing and the displacement of approximately 10 million people?
Certainly, the United Nations has really raised the flag on this particular conflict. And I mean, if you read some publications, they talk of it as the forgotten war, especially in a time where the world seems seized with the Hamas-Israel conflict, as well as, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Certainly, Sudan seems to be one of those forgotten conflicts of the world. But what needs to be done is, countries that are around that region, but particularly countries with influence, have got to really raise the stakes in terms of the United Nations engagement. But not only that, in forums such as the G20, in forums such as, the BRICS formation, there needs to be a greater elevation of this conflict. And so I'm hopeful that given the elevation of the African Union as a member of the G20, that we will begin to see perhaps a movement in this particular conflict in terms of the rise of its importance in dominating the discourse. There are so many challenges around the world, but it's important that emphasis be brought into this conflict. But Alison, if you'd allow me to make one more point, I think for the global north, as they try to gain more supporters towards towards their side in terms of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it's key that they elevate their role in terms of this conflict, because the debate from the global south has often been that our conflicts tend to be forgotten in the light of conflicts that are more interesting for the national interests of the global south. And unfortunately, it cannot be any longer.
Absolutely, Musa. Thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for your valued insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for a future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On this today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can we expect